So somehow I got, designated to be the facilitator here. I'm gonna say it's because I'm the one that does the least about all this anyway. That's how a facilitator gets the message. So, appreciate everybody being here. Hope everybody had a good Thanksgiving and are still full from Thursday. So, I want to start out by just thanking everybody for being here. I think a lot of y'all bring a lot of knowledge and expertise to the table that I think will help with this process and everything. Just appreciate you agreeing to be part of it. Certainly the authorities faced some challenges over the years. I've been at the COG as a 2A planner for 28 years and been a part of it when it's commissioned and now the authority, from Bob to Chris. And it certainly had its challenges that have prevented things from moving forward at times and everything. Really missed some opportunities, so hopefully this will be a way to help them move forward. A lot of time and effort went into developing that study, coming up with the alternatives and everything, so I want to thank Catherine and Angie and their team for all the work they did. There was a lot of meetings and herding of cats and digging down on information and everything to kind of put that together and everything, so appreciate them and their willingness to help navigate this process forward too. And I guess our task, as I see it, is just to help them evaluate the alternatives they have and then provide them some guidance on how they might move forward with it, just especially bringing your expertise and been involved in this periodically over time, and about ways they could change things in their governance structure, potentially to reorganize and get past some of the hurdles they currently have in their current governance structure. Today's really just a kickoff meeting to kind of, give some overview, get some background information for everybody, get everybody on the same page, help us do some housekeeping, figure out how we're gonna operate as a committee, and then a chance for discussion and background on that and everything. Does that seem okay with everybody? I think I would like to start it off by just, having everybody kind of do some introductions and everything and give a little bit about how you got to the table and what your background is. I'll go ahead and start. So, Chavinley with Council of Governments, we are the 2A planning entity for the upstate. I've been in that capacity for 28 years now, basically. And, we've helped with sewer agencies throughout the upstate for that time, working in connection with DHEC and helping that. So been involved with Oconee County and the Sewer Authority for that period of time too. And our role is to kind of help facilitate discussions. So again, that's really why I'm in this chair. I have a lot of institutional knowledge, been around a long time, I know a lot of stories. I don't have the technical expertise most of y'all have at the table. So from that standpoint, I'll help facilitate as we move forward. And that's me. And then
I'm Lynn Stevens. I'm the Secretary, Treasurer, Board, OJRC Board, as well as Office Manager here at the OJRC.
Okay. I'm Scott Paris. I'm the Utilities Director for the City of Westminster. I was the Utilities Director at Walhalla for 22 years. Recently came to Westminster, and I've been on the board the entire time I've been in Oconee, so about 22 and a half years. In that time I've been committee chairman for over a couple of committees on the board and also board chairman. So I've got a little bit of background on the board in the current makeup, first as the commission and now the authority. So hopefully that'll help out some. Look forward to it.
I'm Scott Willett. I'm the Executive Director of Anderson Regional Water. I guess I get to just disabuse you of the idea that you know less than anyone here. But what I think I bring to the table is I've been the Executive Director at the Joint Water System, similar organization for about 20 years. Prior to that, I worked with other regional organizations in San Diego County, which had 23 member agencies, and at Metropolitan Water, which had 34 member agencies when I was there. So a little bit of experience with regional governance issues and regional utilities.
I'm Joel Jones. I'm currently the CEO at REWA over in the Greenville area. I've been in this business for about 32 years now. And worked with some of these fine people. Worked for a couple of them. Worked at two different utilities, Spartanburg Water and REWA during my time. And got operational experience, regulatory experience. I've done a little bit of everything in my career. So hopefully I can bring something to the table that will help.
Chris Eliezer, I'm the executive director at the Oconee Joint Regional Sewer Authority. I've been here since mid-2017. Prior to that, I was at REWA for 5-6 years or so as a collection system department manager in asset management. And before that, the water distribution department manager for the city of Anderson, and then started my career with DHEC and most of the water programs there.
And I'm Scott McClumbing, Central Light and Water's engineering supervisor. I've been with the city right at 39 years now, so I've been on the board. I think it's about 5 or 6 years now. Time flies, so I'm looking forward to see where this goes and how it helps us to move forward. So.
I'm Graham Rich. I retired 2 years ago from REWA. I was there 6.5 years. Prior to that, I'd worked for 6 other utilities, had managed 4 of them, 3 or 4 in South Carolina, 1 in Ohio, and 1 in Little Rock, Arkansas. I've worked all different forms of governance, from county systems to Commission of Public Works, to the one in Little Rock, which was a merger of North Little Rock and Little Rock systems to create a regional system called Central Arkansas Water. And we were the largest water provider in the state of Arkansas. And so I've got a broad range of experience of different governance models. And this is basically all I've done in my career is work for utilities.
I'm Rivers Stillwell. I'm a lawyer in Greenville. I didn't go to law school to be a sewer lawyer, but somehow I backed into it. I realized I've been shorting myself because I've been saying I've been working for REWA for 18 years, but just looking at the numbers, it's been 20. So since Leo introduced me to REWA in 2004, I've been working with them, and then since he passed away, I've been their outside general counsel. So I got 2 of my CEOs at the table, so I have to be on my best behavior.
I'm Sue Schneider. I know a number of the professionals in the room, and when I started my sewer work, it was back in the 80s in the construction grant, being at the bottom of a manhole, setting a weir, doing flow modeling and pulling samples, to coming down to South Carolina in '98 and having the opportunity to work for Spartanburg Water. The sewer side has 9 wastewater treatment plants, 70 and ever growing number of pump stations, and retired there as a CEO in 2022. And as I look across to Joel again, I recommend retirement to everybody. It's a wonderful place to be.
Whoa.
I'm Amanda Brock. I'm the Oconee County Administrator. I've been at Oconee County 24 years, the last 16 in administration, previous working on grant sewer. So the county will represent the economic development and planning components for sewer infrastructure expansion in Oconee. And of course, we're not on the board or have a seat on the board, but we have a pretty decent partnership with the authority. I would like to strengthen those bonds as we move forward.
Sylvia Myers, I am the city administrator for the city of Valhalla. I think Scott Joe may have both of y'all beat. I've been in this role for a little over a year, been on the board for I think right at a year. And my background is more planning, finance, even a little bit of economic development, mostly in Anderson County. So it will be a learning process for all of us. But in the last year, I've learned a good bit about the board and the possibilities there. And so I think there's a lot of good things ahead.
Oh, sure. Hi, Catherine Avedon. I'm a senior environmental planner for Bolton and Mink. I've spent my consulting career doing a lot of large land use regional planning, especially around utilities. So really grateful to continue to be a part of this project, working under W.K. Dixon, now Ardura, to just help continue to facilitate this process forward. Really here today to answer questions that you have about the prior work that was completed, including the master plan that we assisted Weston and Sampson with. So here to answer any questions as they come.
And I'm Angie Metlin, Vice President, Director of Strategic Funding and Regulatory Affairs for WK Dixon, now Ardura. I've been doing this I'm in my 32nd year. Like Chris, I started my career at DHEC Tech, which we can't say that anymore. DES Tech doesn't have the same ring to it. So, but have been in the consulting world for over 20 years. And this has really been a very, very interesting effort, study. And I think I'm just so grateful to everyone sitting around the table of giving your time, expertise, and energy to this. This was the whole idea is that bringing some folks from the outside of Oconee County to help the folks that are working in this effort right now can only make what comes out of this even better. And there is no group of outside professionals that I admire more than than you guys sitting around the table. So I think as a group you have, I know there's a lot of work to be done in a short period of time to at least do this initial evaluation, this initial discussion, but I think it's going to be well worth the time, effort, and energy. So thank you all for doing this and giving up your time.
I did make an ad hoc agenda Friday before Thanksgiving, and that's about as much thought as no. So the next step we'll talk about is just kind of the purpose of the committee and the process we'll take. Ultimately, the committee was put together to help them evaluate the recommendations from the study. So there was two primary recommendations and a kind of tertiary one. So primary recommendation was to revise the governance structure to just make it more efficient, take out some of the hurdles they have both financially and from a board structure standpoint, and to look at options there and how that can work. If the secondary recommendation was to consider if restructuring of the authority doesn't seem feasible, doesn't seem reasonable after discussion, looking to maybe another agency that could come in and take it over and begin to run it also, find a partner agency. I don't know what the reality of that is, but that was, the potential for that out there is to go seek somebody else that already sets it up and then just kind of turn it over, I guess, lock, stock, and barrel to them to run and look at options for how that might work too. So maybe sort of like a consolidation of different authorities and how that would work. So those are the two primary recommendations that we had as a group. So our purpose was to kind of evaluate those and see what was possible and give guidance on that. And then is that the extra one is look at sewer collection governance. Currently, the three cities maintain their own sewer collection facilities. They own and operate them and everything to different degrees of, want to. Some might want to turn them over, some don't.
And I'll add to that. So really, the two governance structures for the authority is what you guys are charged with evaluating. The collection system, and in doing that, part of that may be how do you set up whatever this new governance structure is to enable an authority type situation to more effectively and efficiently get into the retail business. Right now, it's challenging the way the current governance structure of the authority is. So ultimately, each individual member of the authority plus West Union, they don't have a seat at the table right now, and we are not recommending that they have a seat going forward. But they have their own sewer collection system, and they are very, very small, so they're in this. And the county has now coming up sewer assets, and we are recommending that they have a seat at the table, which Amanda said that they did not. So again, but going forward, that collection system piece is in the hands of each of the entities. We weren't charged with saying that must happen, that there must be consolidation of collection systems. But what we do recognize is it's becoming a bigger challenge for folks to operate and maintain utility systems, particularly when they're smaller entities. So if there becomes a time in the future that some folks want to consolidate, I think the authority, whatever form it takes, needs to have a mechanism in order to do that, and to do that at an easier level than they have currently, based on the current agreements and governance structure. Does that make sense? Okay.
So I apologize.
No, yeah, it's all good.
Can I add on to what Angie, the big issue, and Chris knows this all too well, having been on the collection side at REWA, is that I forget how many different entities we had before consolidation, Joel.
16.
16. And the problem was, when it would rain, all those collection systems would cause our manholes to overflow. And finger pointing always said we should make our lines bigger. We always said we don't know how big to make them if you're not going to maintain your lines. And therein is, I think, one of the issues. And I don't want to step on any city or county's toes on this, but when you're dealing with multiple entities like that, we were very close to a consent order on our collection system. And you know, how do you make 16 different entities follow a plan to do that? The consolidation of some of the fire districts' collection systems certainly is helping that, but it's still a challenge.
So now Chris is handing me the official agenda.
Yeah, and the reason why that is I spoke with our attorney, and he said this, you know, this is a committee that was put together by our Board of Commissioners, and thus he felt it did qualify for the requirement of having to advertise this. So this is a function of our board. So, you know, public notice was given, discussion did qualify for executive session privilege, according to him. It is also an advisory committee. We do not have the authority to make any policy for ourselves. It ultimately is to provide advice and recommendations to those that can make the decisions. So with that said, you know, most of the discussion at this meeting and those in the future will qualify for that privilege. We also discussed the possibility of potentially having some that would be open to the public to allow for the public to provide input into the matter. So that would be something that we would discuss as we move forward. But that's why you Chip, have the new agenda that you didn't see earlier.
So, no worries. All right, well, I'll backtrack, but let's start with C, so establishment committee rules. I guess I've been designated as the facilitator. I don't know that it makes me chair. Probably would help to have a chair of the committee. It can be me. I'm open to the group to discuss how they want to set that up.
So technically, Chip, you are an ex officio member, which means you have no vote.
Right.
So.
Yeah. So let the finger pointing start. And
Why don't we just, since everybody knows them generally, even though we really don't, but we pretend we do, just to say that we'll say Robert's rules for proceed.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So generally it'll be Robert's rules, and then so nominations for chair.
I'll nominate Graham Ranch.
No!
Well, I second that one.
You did it. You did it yourself.
Snap.
Sorry, Graham, I wasn't quick enough on
I
the
know. You taking the bullet for me.
All right.
I usually protect you, buddy, you know that.
So technically, there's a motion and a second on the table. Discussion. Any other nominations?
The enthusiasm is overwhelming on my end.
It's a Monday morning.
It is very early.
Look on the bright side, Graham.
everything I have pulled for the last month has lost, so you probably aren't gonna win.
Okay, well,
With no other nominations,
Sure.
have a vote. Graham is now the chair. Thank you.
Acclamation.
So for that, I think we discussed maybe just a simple majority for your votes. Is that good with everybody?
So,
a lot of these people work for me, may not be willing to affirm my nomination.
I will
all in favor?
do an outstanding job.
We have a
Leonard
majority.
County. The only one, were you voting or not?
Yeah.
Okay, that, you were, yeah?
Should we do a show of hands?
Yeah, that probably
For
would help.
keeping straight.
Aye.
Okay.
Could I, so when we go to D, I don't want to rush the agenda, but this definitely, I agree with, the general counsel that this would qualify for executive session. There's a question of whether you want to do some of this in open session though. I know it can get sensitive at one point, but all of it's probably not crazy politically sensitive, so I just.
Given what's happened in Clemson recently, I think the more you do in open session, the better.
And that's the reason why I did go
Yeah.
to him specifically for the Clemson matter,
Is,
to make sure.
is he
that-
your attorney too, or?
No, we have a separate.
Okay,
Yes, we have separate.
that's the thing that I see. This is obviously potentially very politically unsettling, and so the more that we can do an open session.
It was, and I
Don't want
found,
to shoot yourself in the foot, but you know, you want to be above board.
I found this even just the other day after speaking, it was Lawrence Flynn that made that recommendation that we proceed that way, but there was some case law, I believe, or maybe it was just an attorney general's opinion that stated that advisory committees in general were not subject to
Okay.
FOIA. So I think that it was somewhat covered
Yeah.
either way, but yeah, that was, Clemson is what drove me to even
Yeah.
inquire about it.
So maybe we could do, I mean, I've had times where the board's going along and then they ask me a question, and I said, you may wanna ask me that question in executive session, so if y'all are okay proceeding in open session, then just anybody who has a question or a topic they'd rather talk about, like the contractual matters, then we could entertain a motion to go into executive session and do it.
So you're gonna be our filter for that?
I'm gonna try to keep my ear open a little bit.
I do like the thought of keeping everything we can in open.
Is, Chris, is Lawrence gonna participate in any of these at any time, just to sit in and listen?
That I do not know, but I do know that Lawrence had given us, speaking with you,
Yeah.
you have a homework assignment for everybody, so there'll be something.
Maybe the next one, maybe the next one will be where he may want to
And he'll be
participate.
at the next
Okay.
meeting, that's correct, after everybody has the opportunity to read what he had drafted.
Does this committee have directors and administrators insurance?
You know,
You know, I don't,
Do we need it?
I don't think so.
I wouldn't think so
I'm the guy
either.
sitting here.
As an advisory
Confirm
committee?
insurance.
Yeah, I think you're just, again, as Chris stated, this whole intent is just to come up with a set of recommendations or advise on the path forward,
Right.
and not to take, like, I mean, this committee won't take up anything that is currently under the OJRSA, anything that they're doing. You may hear about some things, but you are not taking any actions other than being the full advisement. And then it ultimately comes back to the current authority board to make those decisions.
The only reason I bring it up is I'm on a fixed income now, so.
Yeah.
Well, I think too, while we're discussing that, I think it would be worthwhile with what else is taking place in Clemson
Yep.
to also suggest, or well, not suggest, but to state that anything that is discussed in executive session is not to be discussed outside of it, even with
Right.
those that appointed you to this committee.
That's a good point, Chris. Very good.
Will Lynn stay on to take notes as we go forward?
She will.
Okay.
Yes, she will.
So this time, y'all are choosing not to go into
That's it. Unless this gentleman recommends it.
No, like anybody can make a motion if they want to.
Right, yeah.
It's just like there's no motion, because I think there's kind of a consensus, like, let's see how far we
Right,
can
yeah.
get.
I just want to make sure. So
Yeah.
I'm not a
Yeah.
voting member. I just want to make sure before I miss that. All right, so that's the general purpose of the committee, is to help them evaluate the alternatives and see what the path forward is. And we'll get more information as it goes along to help us do that. The process is really the question about how we do that. And I think we were talking about monthly meetings, maybe more if we need to, but as that goes forward, does that in general work for everyone? Just, you know, as we do that. I hear we're gonna have a homework assignment, so.
Yeah. And I think, so this committee, we were very, very intentional about this. We didn't want this committee to drag on. We wanted you guys to get in, review what has been done to date, your homework that is coming up, which has probably the meat of everything that you're going to be reviewing, and then make your recommendations based on what we outlined in the study. And there may be more stuff that you guys can recommend, provide some insight and recommendations on. But the intent is to be done with your work for this initial step by the middle of next year. So, kind of a 6-month time frame to kind of work on this and get to some at least initial advisement. And I think overall, we're looking at those two paths, with the reorganization being the first path, because we think that that's probably the way that most folks will want to go. But should it look like that that's not going to be feasible financially or politically or whatever that is, then there's got to be another option. So that your homework assignment is kind of the background of those two different options.
Everybody okay with that? Okay. I think next step is if you want to kind of give the background.
Yeah, so did everybody have a chance to kind of look at the study? It's on OJRSA's website. If we need to pull it up, we can. If not, I'll just talk through. There's probably everything you need to know and more. Particularly of interest will be all the agreements. They're on what's on the website, so you can look through them. And I think what is very, very, I know we had heard it from various folks about how convoluted those agreements were, because they've been stacked over the years, including going back to agreements with the commission, the Oconee County Sewer Commission. And so there's a lot of contradictory things in all of them, and it's very complicated. The agreements have complicated something already. I mean, running a sewer utility is not an easy job, and this has made the authority's job probably even more difficult. I think the county not having a seat at the table has been complicated. As Amanda mentioned, I think there have been improvements in the relationship between the county and the authority, but with so much going on and that economic development piece and areas of the county that are not sewered yet, that the county does need a seat at the table, because that's where a lot of decisions will be made going forward. The master plan that Catherine mentioned about has a 20-year CIP in it, which is daunting. The amount of money that is going to need to be spent, even if there is not another stick of pipe put in the ground, or if there's only infill in areas that I think everybody kind of agrees need to be sewered, or what you would want to be sewered in Oconee County. Because there certainly are areas that don't lend itself to being sewer, nor do people want sewer in those areas. So there's a lot of financial pieces to this. And I honestly, I think looking at the way the board is currently structured, the number of members, how many, how it's based, I think is complicated as well. It's probably made it a little more political than it would have otherwise been. You've basically got three main entities, Seneca, Walhalla, and Westminster. And again, I mentioned West Union. And then there are the things I also mentioned about the current agreements not allowing OJRSA to really be in the retail business. So, and then there is the way that it's structured, which the authority cannot take on debt without full agreement by every entity. I mean, it's got to be 100%, or the authority cannot take on debt. So it's, yes, sir.
Is that all debt, or is that for new capacity, or is that for R&R?
That is all debt, correct? Yes.
That's correct.
Yes. Yeah.
What's the current debt?
There is none.
0.
That's a good thing.
Yeah.
Well, it's a good thing until you've got stuff that you have to.
I'm kidding.
Yeah.
You have to encourage that.
So in the report, if you look at the primary sewer treatment trunk line conveyance recommendations, we outline a number of things with regard to modifying the current board composition, establishing an allocation, a voting allocation. Like, for instance, we've talked about how your authority does it, where on some votes it's a 1-to-1, each member gets 1 vote, but if it's on something with regard to debt, financing, capacity, there's some pro rata share allocation vote. Is that correct? I understand that is.
Simple way to say it is we have 2 types of debt. One is replacement R&R.
Right.
Maintaining current assets. That's a no's vote.
Right.
Every agency gets 1 vote.
Right.
All right. In that instance, majority carries it. That is to maintain the asset, deals with whatever water quality, anything quality related. If we get ready to expand capacity, because it changes the entire structure of the way the debt flows out. Because all the debt in the first instance is prorated according to whatever the own capacity is. The second type is to increase capacity. If we increase capacity, those systems, those agencies that elect to participate in the expansion have to vote unanimously.
Okay.
Actually, the councils have to
Right.
that approval. And then once they do that, then we redo the math going forward on any other future maintenance debt that we have going forward. All of the votes other than the election of board officers is flow based.
Okay. So see, that's kind of part of what I want to hear from Sue and all of you on to share what you've seen, Graham, what you've seen, how to do that. So looking at those debt approval, so voting allocations and then debt approval processes and policies, which may be interrelated. And then also, let me get my glasses because I'm getting old. And then perhaps you want some triggering actions for for adding new members. I don't know who they would be, but maybe we've got it covered. Maybe you don't even have to do that based on where sewer is and where it's going to go and that sort of thing. But that could be also, do you ever want to entertain any entity outside of Oconee County to be a part of this authority board? So what would that look like? And then again, the establishing the processes and procedures that would allow the authority to own, operate, maintain retail sewer collection. Looking at any rate structure. So right now, if there needs to be any modification, so within the last year and a half, the authority has gone from a flow, a metered flow rate to metering off of water usage for each entity, correct?
Correct.
And that seems to have worked out well
Yes.
so far. It hasn't impacted the revenue coming into the authority. I think the entities like that. It's easier. It's not based on flow meters that maybe that have mixed flows and things like that. It's an easier process to handle. So maybe that doesn't need to be looked at. However, there is going to be I think, but going down, if you go down the road of retail, then maybe it's as simple. The way you do that is you have your retail customers would just be based off of, or the authority's retail customers would be based off of water usage as well. So,
Yeah, just a question, one from our wastewater guys here. Doesn't that kind of absolve folks from worrying about I&I if it's only on the meter side?
If it's only on the meter side, yeah, absolutely, it does.
So the authority is working on that, and they still are using those flow meters, and that is part of the authority is under a consent order right now, and had to do a full CMOM, which then, as we know, everything rolls downhill unless it's pumped, and we're not pumping; we're just rolling downhill. So all of the requirements that the authority had from the CMOM then have to be implemented. Yeah.
And if I can piggyback off of this, and I don't want to, we can talk about this later, but to address something that Mr. Rich brought up earlier, and to Mr. Willett's question of what Angie's talking about as well, is that DHEC, when they got involved in our enforcement process, they required us to address and handle and enforce our sewer use regulation on the upstream user, because there was enforcement action taken on some of these satellite systems by DHEC themselves, but the amount of involvement that they had directly with them.
So there wasn't a coordination between you and the other satellite
Correct.
systems.
They are strictly holding us accountable for enforcing, like Angie said, I guess in this case it would be uphill.
Yeah.
So yes, so there's been a difference from what we had done versus how things were handled, at least from what I saw during my time at REWA. And this was mainly prior to you coming on board at REWA, where there was a lot of discussion between us there and the satellite systems. But they are fully expecting us to require them to.
I'm sure those discussions with Samantha went real well.
Yeah, so what's happening right now with regard to that rate piece and all of that is there is a rate cost of service financial analysis that is going on right now for the authority. It is nearing completion or getting close to it, if I'm not mistaken, what Wildan said.
Well, I don't know. I haven't spoken with them, but I know that, I just gave them maybe a week or so ago, 2 weeks ago, the CIP for the next 10 years.
Right.
Who's doing that stuff?
Wildan. Daryl Parker.
Wildan.
Okay, I'm not familiar.
So they were on the team for this,
Okay.
and they had worked with the authority before. But to that end, you guys will get that information soon as well. So you can see what the next 10 years with regard to, and further than that, we'll also provide you with a link to the master plan. It's on the OJRSA's website as well, so you can see what that looks like. And then each entity is also going to be doing their own rate analysis, cost of service, financial study, because even though now it's not a there is a wholesale rate or a rate that's added to based on the water usage for each entity. What that rate looks like in the future is definitively going to have an impact on each entity, because they not only have to own, operate, and maintain their own collection systems, which their cost of service study entails, but now they have to look at what does that look like on top of what we're going to get from the authority. So that's a big part of this. I think that there's a lot that is going to be a lot of capital improvements that are going to be needed even in the next 10 years. And if development continues to happen in the upstate the way it has been, then there's probably a planned expansion in the foreseeable future. A lot of different things like that. So that's why we wanted, if we can get ahead of this and get the governance straightened out so that they're in a better position to proactively be prepared for all of this, the better. So in a nutshell, all of that, this is laid out, and what it's going to take, and this is going to be part of your homework, is we asked that OJRSA's counsel, which is Lawrence Flynn and one of his partners, basically give you guys the process from a legal standpoint of what it's going to take to reorganize under the same Authority Act, because that's the deal. Is this OJRSA is organized under the same statute that you are, Scott. So what does that look like? What are the steps that have to happen? So that's going to be part of your homework. He's done that, and then he's also put out there, okay, if this looks like it's not going to happen, then what does it look like to either consolidate with or enter into some sort of cooperative agreement? Maybe it's an O&M relationship for a while that then turns into a full consolidation down the road. What does that look like to get out of being a joint water and sewer authority in South Carolina and do something else? So that's part of that. But at the minimum, if the authority is going to reorganize, each entity will have to agree to basically get out of the current agreements and draw up a new set of agreements. Oconee County, everybody has to agree to bring Oconee County to the table. So all of that has to happen for this to occur. One of the things we're dealing with right now is that the current set of agreements, even though they have basically a re-up clause in them, I think we're at 17 and a half years left on these current agreements. So when you go to like Trish at SRF, that's what she looks at. And so she basically has said the longest right now that she'll finance anything is 17 and a half years. If she will finance.
Wow.
Welcome to the party.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming and being the chair.
Yeah.
Who drafted the original joint water system agreement?
Lowell.
Lowell Ross did.
It's very different than the one we have, and Margaret would have been the one that drafted ours. Ours has a provision that every time you issue debt, that the life of the agreement extends to the cover of the full debt.
Yeah.
So if you keep doing 30-year debt, you basically keep pushing the life of the organization.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, so that is, again, that's why I opened this up with the current agreements are very prohibitive to this authority acting the way it needs to.
One more question. You made a comment that everybody had to agree. I get everybody has to agree to add a member because you become jointly responsible for the debt.
Right.
All right. If three parties wanted to exit, it would have to be unanimous. One party could hold the other three hostage
They have.
Yeah.
for exit.
They have.
What is the county sewer commission? Does it still exist? Was it an SPD? What was it?
There was an SPD formed to
For
study,
the feasibility,
to become an authority. Or the feasibility of the commission.
to
Yeah,
provide sewer.
Sewer, yeah.
The original commission was created under some type of statute though, wasn't it?
That is it was a department of the county.
Correct.
From, and I've got,
Yeah.
and there may be even something in.
There's
Lawrence's
in the,
memo that discusses the history of it, but we started off as an SPD prior to home rule, then went to Oconee County in 77 or 78, does that sound about right?
Yeah.
Then 2007, we are what we are now.
And
Yeah.
what guidelines was the present administration or organization for?
under the Joint Water and Sewer Authority Act of South Carolina, yeah, so
But
if,
it was amended to allow for wastewater to be part of it. Because it was originally just for drinking water, correct, Scott?
yeah, if you look at the very first section of the, there's the history of OJRSA in here, and it goes through everything, and all the agreements, and that's the thing, is they're stacked. They all refer back to each other. I mean, it is very convoluted, and it took, I probably could have had 3 monitors, not just 2, because I would pull up one and then pull up the other and go back and forth between them. So, and I mean, if you look at it, I don't know that, I mean, it's just like the county was on it, then the county was off of it, and I don't know that there was ever any formally, it's very convoluted. So in looking at that, whether those agreements, something needs to happen to them, there needs to be a new agreement, regardless. But, you know, I guess if everybody agrees that everybody could just wait it out, but that was our point, is you don't want to wait 18 years and be dealing with this. So
I'll go ahead, you provided me with extra
I
copies
did.
of this, so I'm just gonna give these out, and I may just get you to get a few more bound
okay.
for me to.
I've got a binder at work, we can bring some if we need to.
You have one?
Yeah.
Okay.
So not
Sure you
only
don't
do the
want to-
cities have to agree, it has to be
Okay.
unanimous
Okay.
agreement.
Correct.
And there's an election in March.
Let me ask you, let me put this
Municipal
on the
elections
table.
will be in March.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chris. So those unanimous agreements must either be prior to or after
Can I,
Yeah.
can I
for a June delivery.
ask this question about the county being a participant? I only know what I know. Like, I grew up in Rewa, and so, and then I learned some other SPDs and stuff. But is it typical that the county is in the sewer business in the state?
I'd say typical.
Atypical,
There are a
right?
few, but, Aiken County, being one of them.
Pickens County State.
Pickens
Aiken
County.
County,
That ain't exactly fixed, but
Yeah.
that's a different story.
That's not a good
I said technically they're in the business.
Well, I was just thinking,
Lancaster
members
County.
being political entities is a difficult thing, and adding another political entity. I'm representing Greenville County right now and watching what they're going through in their throes of the elections. It may exacerbate the problem, but I know basically this, when I look at this, the governance follows the ability to finance, right? And they're like chicken and egg. So, yeah.
Just the wastewater, the example that I have, we've got every square foot of Anderson County, in my service area is in a district. I cannot see how you can plan, growth for Oconee County, on wastewater, without some entity willing to take up the non-municipal areas, because you're gonna have areas that are outside of the city that aren't economically advantageous to add to a city or a municipality. I don't know how you would, unless you're gonna create another district.
Yeah,
To fill
and-
those spaces.
Yeah, and here's my take on it. I have worked for county government, so I understand the concerns the county government has about, giving up control of that. But I will say that it adds another layer bureaucracy, and I'm not being critical, so anything I'm saying is not directed toward anybody. But when you put it under the county or something like that, you're fighting with all the other departments for revenues and things like that. And my experience, having worked for different governance models, is that some kind of entity with fair representation being overseeing those areas that the county or city might have, so.
No, I would agree with that. I'm just thinking that when I look at Oconee County, it looks like we have several municipalities in that service areas. And we did the master, the study I sat on was down around Fairplay.
Correct.
And some unincorporated areas. All right, state of South Carolina, my understanding is you can form a new town all you want, you just can't raise any taxes or have any revenue. Because you can only have so much of an increase, and any increase of over zero gets you to nothing.
The Pels are a conundrum.
That's the Powdersville,
Pels are.
Pelzer and Powder.
Well, Pendleton too,
Yeah.
or Pelzer too, you're right. But I mean, they're left with,
Right.
they had no revenue, therefore you can have 10% more, well, okay, we can have 50% more, then zero.
Yeah.
It doesn't get you anywhere. I don't know how you ever
So
grow wastewater.
I'll make a comment on that. I think before you begin to figure out what the governance is, you need to figure out who you're going to serve.
Yeah.
Who are you trying to serve through? Is it the ratepayers spread out through whatever geographic region you're going to serve? Is it municipalities close to the county? Because that's going to determine how you set this up.
Correct, and that's the master plan. That's why we had the Catherine on both teams through this. And so the master plan pretty well set up where sewer is more likely than not to go in the future. And a lot of that is infill within existing municipalities plus specific areas that lend itself to economic
And I
development.
guess the point, not what I'm saying is you got to figure out as an entity, are we serving the ratepayer? Are we serving
Right.
the municipalities? Are we serving the county? That's what you got to figure out from the get-go.
Yeah.
I think it's better to serve the ratepayer, and then you put whatever governance is in place to serve them, and you take all the middle out of it. So that's just my 2 cents.
You had mentioned that the county is also in the sewer business. That's been very
New.
recently,
Correct.
isn't it?
2015,
2015, it's been that long, okay. Do they own any assets or
13 miles.
13 miles?
Mhm.
That's not that project that's going up toward the exits off 85, is
It
it?
is.
Oh, okay, okay,
Now, the sewer authority owns exits 1 and 2,
okay,
and then the county owns all the way down to Golden Corner Pump Station,
okay,
Golden Corner Commerce Park, where there is the million gallon per day
right.
pump station.
The reason I was asking about the sewer commission is I was looking for a legacy SPD that could be out there instead of
We did that.
reinventing one.
Yeah.
Because I'm lucky enough in Pickens, the Pickens County Water Authority, it lay fallow for years, but now it's back, so. But I have that in the back of my mind of like, okay, how can you do this? When Graham mentioned 85, I remember like Pioneer Water lays over that.
Yeah.
So if you can get yourself multi-county, you can get yourself a different mechanism too. I think they even have sewer in their enabling act, they just never used it.
Who was that?
Pioneer.
They do, so this goes into some of the discussions I've had with Lawrence. And it may be stated in there, I think that Pioneer Water is not technically an SPD, they fall under the Community Water Systems Act or whatever it's called, where they can provide collection but not treatment.
Okay.
But then I think that in looking and researching us and how we were created with that, with the task of feasibility, and that being the extent that it would require legislative action to allow for us to provide treatment.
Yeah, and you
Well,
even
that's-
look at some of these agreements, and Pioneer Water is in some of these agreements. So I mean, it's again, it's all over the place.
But that's part of what I was looking to pour one entity into the other. Like if you had a clean entity, and believe me, Lawrence, y'all may know, I don't do any debt financing. I'm not a bond lawyer. I'm more like what's politically feasible is more my strike. But if you poured it into another, like an asset purchase, then that's what I was That's what I was going.
And I
for.
think we have looked, and, you know, this goes back to 2021 or 2022, and this was some of the commissioners that had us look into a lot of this, because there was serious discussion back, you know, when, you know, several months after we went into and agreed to the consent order about us, you know, having to go into receivership, because we didn't know how we were even gonna be able to proceed.
Who's
without
under
the
consent
funding.
order? I know the joint authority is, but which of the municipalities?
Wahala and Westminster. But then again, you know, the state has pushed that on us, so we went and revised our sewer use regulation to define and come up with an acceptable level of inflow and infiltration. So we went and did that, and now I think we have all of the cities to some extent, I wouldn't say with a consent order, but with somewhat of a mandate, that we've been able to quantify to some level that everybody is in exceedance of that minimum acceptable limit of inflow and infiltration. So they're all, now is where it's rolling up to where they're now having to look into it. It's taken, you know, 2 or 3 years to establish that. But everybody now, whether they're under consent or not, is having to put considerable effort into identifying and then ultimately correcting and addressing.
You just following up what Joel said about serving the ratepayers. I would agree with that, because from the ratepayer perspective, you know, going through with REWA and the sub-districts, I've always thought, living in Greenville County, like, it's my left pocket or my right pocket. It's the same, you know, so I don't care. Like, growing up, I didn't even know we were in the Wade Hampton Sewer District. I had to ask my dad when I started working for REWA. Never even knew whose district we were in. So most of the people probably don't care, but the municipalities obviously do, to some extent. And mostly, I think what the ratepayer would care about is, you know, state the obvious. I don't want to pay for anybody else's sewer system to get fixed. So the equities of the financing is, my instinct is that, like, instead of being either or, it's going to take a little bit of everything, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of that, and to shape the compromise. So what kind of condition, I don't want to step on your toes, but what kind of conditions are the collection systems in? Like, I'm talking order of magnitude for, like, numbers for work that needs to be done.
Worse than rewas or better than rewas, Chris?
I think that we're still trying to identify that. So we had, a report was due back to us back in October from all of the cities. And there was gaps that were identified in that report once it went through the QA/QC process here, and feedback was given back to them to allow for them to continue looking and provide information. But you know, we've got representatives here, and they're, you know, with this committee, they're actually representing their cities and not commissioners, so they may be better to speak about that than I would be.
Yeah.
I guess kind of what I was backing into is this, the issue of, like, what we're, you know, the fix is to be able to execute the plan that Angie talked about, but that's just to basically run in place, right? That's not really expanding capacity for development. It's really just keep the systems operating.
Correct, and but we also want you guys to look at, how do you do that though? How do you expand for economic development? What is that? So probably what we need to do also, Chris, is provide everybody with your impact fee, how you do impact fees, and your current rate model or structure. Okay. So I mean, that's part of it. So yeah, status quo is one piece of it, but there's a lot of things that in specific areas that the county is targeting economic development, and even maybe some of the municipalities as well.
Yeah.
So how do you fund that? Yeah.
The background I was going toward is, like, in so much of my practice now, it's like economic development's a bad word, especially when these councils keep getting turned out. And so it's like, you can't say, like, we are providing for future growth, because then the constituents are like, we don't want growth. Although I know the county always wants it, and rational actors always know you gotta have it, because people are coming anyway, it's a very
We
politically
just poor
sensitive.
folk here in Oconee.
Yeah.
Sue will attest to
Yeah.
that.
But I see it in Pickens with like the anti-development in the zoning and development, and all that stuff, you know, it's
Well, it's happening in Anderson County, it's happening in Greenville County.
everywhere.
Lawrence
Well,
County.
It's not a question of dirty drawing, it's do you wanna have any control?
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's another
Exactly.
reason when you get people most interested in economic development, the safe thing is industry and commercial, which does not pay the bills on long-term sewer. And that's another risk you run into when you get the county and others pushing you to provide services in an area you'll never get a payback, because rooftops are what pay the bill. And so that's the thing you got to guard yourself against, you
Very good
overstand
point.
yourself and not be able to sustain service.
And what I mentioned is, you know, I don't know how many times I've said it the last 6 months, is wastewater services for community development, not economic development.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that's probably, your pay model is probably exactly the opposite for county government.
Yep.
They want business.
They won't be, but when you're in the sewer business, that does not. That's all fine if you got somebody that's willing to have paid for that development, that's not a part of the sewer entity. If they're willing to fund it, then that's fine.
Just to address what Angie said, just at a high level, not getting any details, but we had a consultant look into what impact fees would be to expand the treatment plant, as well as, I think they just came up with a 25% adder for collection system work to allow the conveyance of additional flow. And what they came back with, and I think it was maybe a year and a half or 2 years ago now, was about $24.50 per gallon.
You're not halfway there in today's market. Our most recent study says it's $50 a gallon for treatment capacity. And that's not including your collection.
So I've always told everybody that wastewater is 3 times the cost or half the capacity, it's about right.
I mean, we've seen bids come in the region that support that. $50 a gallon.
I think going back to your point earlier, Rivers, it is important to say that I think that it is both. It is run in place, you know, maintain what you have, but then provide a mechanism for that growth that, at least in certain areas, is wanted or been looked at, and currently is very hard for them to get around, because it's just been impossible to look at how you, not impossible, but the mechanism for expansion has been, outside the cities, has been.
I was searching for a bumper sticker, like right off the top, like, we need to do this because.
Yeah.
And it has to be, and then the next question is this gonna cost me more or less? You know, just inevitably, people just like, I got this much time for it, so.
The
So
other
this is
challenge,
notation, the taxpayers of Oconee County, the voters, overwhelmingly voted to support sewer with taxpayer money, not just rate,
Right.
not just rate use.
Yeah, you're talking about the bond issuance.
No, the bond issuance in 2012, the referendum for sewer. Once the county got rid of the division of sewer, the county didn't have a mechanism to support sewer any longer because they gave away their sewer
Right.
division.
Right.
So then they went back out to the voters and said, hey, do y'all want us to spend tax dollars on sewer? And the voters said yes.
Does the sewer have retail users? I mean, the county have retail users?
We don't know.
Yeah, so
We
that-
just finished grading a
Yeah.
48-acre pad at Golden Corner.
Yeah.
And the 13 miles is a force main, so you're eliminating a lot of rooftops there. But with the interest of keeping the integrity of the agricultural and farming communities, we didn't want it to be accessible to anybody and everybody for 13 miles from the city of Seneca or here all the way to 85, or we would have nothing but absolute sprawl all the way there.
There again, that proves my point over time. I mean, that's what the county wants. Somebody's willing to fund that type of service.
Sure.
But for an entity that's trying to look 30, 50 years down the road, you
I
can't,
think you'll have
unless you
rooftop
rate.
infill around the building of the industry and commercial components, where like organic growth would happen in and around the Fairplay area because it's already in like a wagon wheel community. But having that growth happen between here and there, just, you know, another Dollar General. I mean, I've been studying the number of metal buildings that keep popping up in the county. There's more than 500 in 2 years.
Yeah, I get what, I understand the goal of wanting to, control growth, respond to the current population's, current citizens' desires. I still think you probably need to look at making regulations and organization and governance structures that have the ability to last a lot longer. I don't think we know what we want in 50 years. I think we know what we want for 5 years. In 50 years, we'll have whole new faces. Okay? And
That's a
this place-
very good point, Scott.
Yeah.
It is.
This group won't be together in 50 years. Well, a couple of you may.
I might, but I'll still be chair of this committee.
Yeah.
Any more questions for Angie right now? Any more questions about the history, how we got here, you know?
So how many members are there on the board presently?
9.
9, okay.
Coming from a group that where 9 looks like a panacea. But I have Congress.
Yeah.
Okay. Among those who've served on the board, what would y'all, what is it that tastes in the general feel of what acceptable number? Is there anybody thought about? In the
As far as
perfect world,
board members?
yeah, you get to you can choose who you want to exclude. How many members do you think makes a perfect board?
5 to 7.
5 to 7.
I would agree with Grant.
5 to 7.
5 is what we recommended.
Huh?
5 is what we recommended, but again,
Oh,
that's
okay.
part of what you guys are looking at as well.
Okay.
And one board, not 2.
So
One
the members by agreement they can say, we're gonna go, this is just a hypothetical, we're gonna go 5 districts where there has to be a commissioner from each of these 5 districts. The board members could vote that tomorrow if they wanted to.
I don't know, that's a
Lawrence.
Lawrence question. I don't
That's
think
in
they
the
can.
memo.
Yeah. Okay.
That's in the memo.
It's very unlikely that all 3 member cities would have a unanimous vote to dilute their own board seat stuff.
Well, it depends. When you said districts, nothing says that you couldn't have, that each municipality couldn't serve as center of that district.
Spoken like a true gerrymander.
One from a district. Well,
That actually, I mean, it's true, like gerrymandering's an awful thing, but it allows you to infinitely change the pieces on the table. You know, of
Yeah.
like where these, well, how many users are there, by the way? If you divided them in 5.
Y'all are just over 20,000
Yeah, about 10,000 customers,
customers.
right around.
Accounts, yeah, okay.
Wait, somebody said 20 and somebody said 10.
Well, she's population wise.
Population.
Okay, 10,
Yeah.
10,000.
10,000.
Another odd question, only because I had the privilege of going to school just a few miles from here. There is an example in South Carolina of a board of 22 different states. Where you have, we have, at Clemson, we have hereditary members and not that we have. Is there something that would preclude allowing we have 3 main municipalities to have their hereditary seat, if you will? And then allow 4
Well, that's so.
4 at large, and that would represent,
So
that
what
would
we
also give you the majority from the county itself, which would seem to get by around some of the parochial politics.
that's kind of what we have recommended in this is that the 3 municipalities would maintain a seat, the county would have a seat, and then there would be 1 at large. So bringing Oconee County on to when we're talking about new agreements, they're bringing the county on as a member.
That's back to where I go back to what Joel said. Who's the real customer?
Right.
Is it municipalities or is it the ratepayer? If it's a ratepayer, you try to put the ratepayers with more say. Not to say that they're gonna vote unanimously. But
What I said was like the radical democratic solution of like go straight to the people as a way to break off the entities. And I realize that's like all the way at the end and you can have anything in between. But that's essentially what broke the system, is having the entities as the constituent members because of the way they grew and everything, as I understand it. So the other thing I said was elect the members, which I don't necessarily favor. And I've noticed like where the board members come from radically changes the flavor of the board and what kind of political pressure they're susceptible to. So there's being appointed by other entities, coming from the governor, you know, all different ways. It is pretty rare to have the different mechanisms.
If I'm not mistaken, the act does, according to Lawrence, and we've had these discussions, the act itself has some predication on how.
They have to be represented, but that's where I would say, if you have 3 primary members, that's easy. And then you have 4 zones where you elect from the masses. That gets you 7. That's the upper bound on the acceptable number, but it gets you, it unwraps some of the reluctance.
Well, I think,
and it also, if you happen to be one of the municipalities, you're probably going to have, looking at Oconee County, most of them, if you were to say there's 4 zones, 4 voting areas in Oconee County, those three municipalities are going to be the heart. They're going to likely be able to get 2, but one would be a publicly elected individual as opposed to a municipal employee.
Go ahead.
thank you, Mr. Chair. So,
I'm new to all this, Chris.
I think that, and I'm not saying we table it in the way that it needs for Robert's rules, but it might be that we hold off on this discussion until everybody has the opportunity to read Lawrence's memo, because it addresses a lot of what I'm hearing discussed now. It goes into the act, goes into who can and can't serve according to the statute. So that's my suggestion.
I was going backwards into it of like, if you had a historical ability to like, what if we just started over and then say, Lawrence, how do you get there? Because I hadn't read Lawrence's stuff, but I mean, you know.
I think that's where he's coming from, is basically starting over under the Joint Water and Sewer Authority.
Because this is what essentially, I mean, the 2 paths we have, I guess, are starting over or giving us away. I mean, if you boil everything away, and that's the bones that are left, those are really the 2 choices. Am I correct, Angie? Starting over or somebody else taking us over?
Yeah.
So let me ask one question on that. So status quo we know is not working, but what's the enforcement mechanism to keep you from staying?
There is none. I mean, that is probably the 3rd option, but that really is not something we wanted to charge you guys with looking at, because we know what that is, but yes.
If it's in the backs of people's mind, that I can always just.
Well, the status quo and what drove this thing was the state bringing this up. And now I wish I had a copy of the letter that RA sent to us. Is RA, which essentially is the state, is expecting us to do something.
That is true, and there is some discussion, unless and until things radically change, that this agency cannot get anything other than grant dollars, but even that's kind of being held. They won't get SRF, so the only option is bond issuance. So we know how that goes, because everybody's going to have to agree.
So that's the trigger.
Yeah, so and this may be a conversation you have with RA. That all sounds, that's the negative, right? But are they offering a carrot? Is there?
Yes.
Financial.
Okay. I'm just saying, because
I believe is the carrot.
Yeah.
is there
They have-
guaranteed financial help?
No.
That's what I'm
Well,
asking.
that's what I'm trying to find. I'm looking to see if I
There's
can
not
find
guaranteed yet, but they have.
Well, they're in a pretty good leveraging point now, because they've got a lot of money
Yeah.
to spend, but that may not be the future.
Correct.
And so that's.
They have indicated that the willingness of the authority to move the needle on this is a serious consideration, and that should this come back and this group recommends certain things to happen, whatever that course of action is, that there could be money set forward to do, because we know that this is just the start. There's more stuff that has to happen. So
And so I would think a goal of this group would be able to set up a governance that leads to an organization that doesn't need RIA to exist.
That would be correct.
So I'm gonna read to you, this is just stated in the document that I had received from RA, and I'm gonna pull just 2 sentences out of here. And this is in the program accomplishments section of it. So they define who the sewer systems are. The participating sewer systems include Oconee County, City of Seneca, City of Walhalla, City of Westminster, and Town of West Union, and then go down a couple paragraphs and they state the efforts to act on recommendations and reorganizational efforts outlined in this plan may be a consideration in evaluations of future funding requests for Oconee Joint Regional Sewer Authority and the participating systems.
So the holdup with them right now is the length of the agreements, is that?
That's an SRF piece.
Okay.
No, and I'm not gonna opine or get in Bonnie's head.
Yeah.
But I think that some of the challenges that we've outlined in this study have been elevated to Bonnie and others that are in Columbia, to the point that they're like, okay, something needs to happen.
I think part of that is the struggles they had with previous funding they were given, and the way it was implemented was at times stopped or delayed due to some of the disagreements and everything, and I think part of the
So
rationale
their
is
concern is the political nature of all the entities.
And I think it's the
And the
long-term,
inefficiencies,
the
yeah.
long-term feasibility, the long-term sustainability. Can this entity sustain itself for the long term? And because there's not enough money, grant money, to do that. So you're exactly right, Joel, is that whatever comes out of this hopefully will be an organization that doesn't, grants are great, but doesn't have to rely on grants.
How is the political nature between this organization and, say, the county and the cities presently? I know there's been a history, but presently, how is the day-to-day relationship between y'all?
I'll let y'all answer that first.
I think it has gotten a lot better, I mean, personally.
Yeah, it's definitely improved.
I'm the newbie, so a lot of the drama happened before I came on, so everything's been roses with me.
There we go.
I think it is a lot better. I mean, I just have 25 years of experience.
Okay.
And it's like awful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Literally
There's a long
couldn't sit
time
in the
that
room
was-
together.
Yeah.
We
Is the-
speak to each other, but I mean, I speak with Bob Ferry's, Scott's director pretty frequently, and I talk to Kevin, and, y'all have a new Laramie, relationships are good, we all have each other's cell phone numbers, we all
Okay.
return calls.
Is there any turnover among the respective councils, like you swear new councils in January that have a bunch of new members? Or is it pretty
I
much?
just have one new member in January, but we do have municipal elections during the proposed scheduling of this.
We just had a few
Okay.
changeover, one who had, or two who had served prior. Things have changed, but they've got experience.
Do they recognize the present limitations of this organization due to agreements, due to all the things on it? Do they recognize that they're hand tying, or maybe that's what they want to do? I mean, a lot of times cities are very, very myopic when it comes to the city versus the county, you know?
There have been councils in the past that have wanted the hands tied.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh, at least at Walhalla.
I will say that I do think, and I'm going to speak generally, not necessarily this particular council, because we do have some new ones, and they're still in the learning process.
Sure.
But most like to have control.
Yeah,
I mean, all of us do.
That's the nature of it, yeah.
So, Ben, probably a dumb question, but is there a guarantee of service for the municipalities from OGS? Is cutting off service, and I'm not saying to get there, but I'm trying to figure out what is the final, if we can't get there, does this commission, would they have to vote unanimously, or could they say, Wall hauling, I'm not big on wall. Treat your own.
Well, we still have that agreement that expires in 2042, so I'm assuming we have to honor that,
Do you?
if nothing else.
I don't know that there's an out in that agreement.
That's what I'm
Yeah.
asking, is it?
Yeah.
Seneca
You
tried
got-
that a few years ago,
Yeah.
the city authority.
So-
Pull out. But I think an agreement was coming, I don't think that was illegal.
I have it's gonna sound like a really weird question. I recognize that wastewater is more of a calling than a career.
Trust
I-
me, it is.
You gotta want to be in it. all right?
I don't look bad for 43, do I?
I was shocked at that. The question, I was looking at some of the financials, and it looks like several are underfunded, and it's a struggle. Deep down, do the municipalities truly want to be in the wastewater business?
I can answer that, and I
Well, I
work
mean,
for,
that goes a long way toward, suggesting different alternatives. is what- is what I'm asking.
City of
I mean, if
Spartanburg
you don't want to
being a
be in
great
the business,
example.
Oh,
and
yeah.
you're not gonna, and it's a drag on your municipal operations. All right, that opens up a different, different potential path, is all I'm saying.
yeah, you've got the control element on one hand, but then on the other, when you have to raise rates, then the council members might get pushback from their constituents because of that. So you have to weigh the importance with the council's control versus we're gonna get our head knocked in if there's any kind of rate increase, so.
But some of that gets driven by whether they're getting enforced. If Chris is getting enforced, okay, but if they get enforced, then it can incentivize more, and until that squeeze becomes about the same.
That was what I was asking earlier. Vertical integration, I get. I mean, it's easy to
Yeah.
control your I&I, it's easy to,
Right.
you got control. I'm just saying, the way it's parsed out right now, who's volunteering to be in a collection business?
And that is part of what we put to each individual entity is they need to look at that because that is a serious concern. We're not only talking about the long-term sustainability of the authority, we're talking about the long-term sustainability of each entity and their own utilities.
So outside of this study here, this program here, and what I mentioned earlier about us having to enforce regulation on the cities, that we put together in the letter that we sent to each of the cities, they had to identify a capital program for rehabilitating and maintaining their system, plus any growth that they wish to have happen on top of that. And we put in there that they had to identify the funding mechanism to do so, and it cannot be grants.
Right.
So they're now being tasked with this. We haven't heard anything back yet. That was put in with the feedback that we provided to them earlier, I think it was earlier this month, that we gave them feedback and allowed them the opportunity to sometime in the middle of January get back with us with that. So I think they're all having to think that through right now, is because whether we do any of it or not, I don't know. We do know we have some O&M that we have to do that we're not going to be able to get out from under this consent order. But if you went through the whole 20-year master plan, if it wasn't said earlier, we're looking at just for the sewer authority, not including anything to do with the cities, was $300 million.
Yeah.
Snap.
So that's only us.
For 10,000.
Yes.
Double snap.
Isn't that incredible? Isn't that incredible?
And the bulk of that, I'm not gonna say the bulk of it, but I think it probably is the bulk of it, is gonna be in between year 0 and 10.
Yep.
Because that's when we're gonna have our first initial upgrade. And Catherine worked on that. Does that sound about right, Catherine?
Yeah, I'm going through. That does sound about right. Also, just FYI to all of you, that was informed by a public survey, and also we sat down with all of the planning entities for the county and also each individual city to ask them to inform the future land use analysis that we did, because the future land use in Oconee County is really minimal in terms of that map and what it shows. It just basically has small or big boxes of areas that say this is going to be agricultural land protected, but there's no actual zoning in place to make that occur, because most of the county is zoned control free, which essentially means it's not zoned. So we wanted the planners to inform our process so that we weren't just making up where the growth could go, and then we used census data and growth analysis to determine
That's smart.
the numbers. Yeah.
So how many users did you get to, how many users does $300 million get you?
I can look that up. Taylor left her house.
While she's looking that up, I will go back. I think the question that Graham asked, I think everybody answered, and Amanda on the authority's relationship with the county. But for the individual municipalities, how about you guys and the authority? Because I mean, I know you're on the authority, but you also have your own relationships with the authority.
I think they're always been positive. There's, I mean, like Chris said, there are things that will be coming up with the cities as part of the consent order from the authority that are pushed to the cities, because, I mean, each city's got I&I problems, and it's known. I think most have been working on those over the last few years, but there's still a lot to get done, and Chris is working on his end to identify it with, they say when rain events happen. The city's just gotta justify their path forward to take care of that. But overall, I think it's been a good working relationship.
You know, as chair, I get to exercise a little bit of latitude in my authority. I was just wondering what time are we serving lunch?
What time?
Okay.
Might be good for a break.
Well, I guess you can call for a break.
Yeah. Everybody gonna wanna take a break for lunch?
You did population, right?
We did 30,000, it was 30,000, but not all the.